These are by far my favorite donuts I've ever made. And I've made plenty of donuts. So let's get going on the recipe. First thing we're gonna do, I do all these by weight, so I will have the numbers in the description below. I'm gonna be doubling today's numbers, so I'm not gonna give you them because it might be confusing, but rest assured, the numbers will be in the description. First thing we need is water. Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna set that aside and we're gonna get it heating up. We want this water hot. Next ingredient is butter. Everybody loves butter. Any recipe built upon butter is guaranteed to be delicious. So you can just stick the whole stick in and it will melt. I prefer to chop them up into smaller pieces just because it melts quicker, because I'm not the most patient person in the world. But if you got time, throw in the whole stick. Okay, so while that butter's coming up to temp, let's weigh out our flour. Our flour's ready, our butter is melting. While this is coming up to temp, some history on this donut. So I lived in Germany for 2 years, and this was my favorite donut I could get at the bakeries there. It was called Spritzkuchen, and any German watching this is laughing their head at my pronunciation. They're a really good donut that's got, because of the ingredients in this, the eggs and other things, it's more of like a custard inside. It's not like a cakey inside, which I really like because the donut itself isn't super sugary, but it's still a nice treat. So in America, sometimes they're called a cruller, many other things, but whatever you want to call them, they're delicious. Now is also a great time to get your oil heating up. I've got a fryer here I'm going to turn on. When I first started making this recipe, I just did it in a pot on the oven with oil. I used a candy thermometer, or I would use like a thermopen because these things read within like seconds, so you could just check the oil and see where it's at. That's where I started off. Over the years, I've realized having a fryer is way easier for how much cooking we do. If you do end up getting a fryer, get a fryer like this one. It's got a tray in the bottom that when you're done, you twist the knob, the oil filters into this base down here, and then you can take these parts out and clean them really easily. And then when you want to fry again, you just pour the oil back in. And then after however many uses, you can just replace it entirely. But this thing makes it so much easier for cleanup. That's the worst thing about frying, is in the past I've kept the container, don't have one, I kept the container, put a funnel and paper towel, pour it in and strain it, filter it. It's this huge ordeal. Getting a good fryer makes this kind of stuff so much easier because you can just put it away with ease. And we're getting the oil temp up to 375. That's our goal temperature. Okay, our butter mixture is mostly melted. So let's go ahead and add the flour right in. And I'm just mixing with a wooden spoon. You can use a plastic spoon, really any utensil. A whisk could work, but it might get a little bit stuck because this does get to be quite the thick mixture. But we're going through and just making sure we're breaking up all those clumps of flour. And as we're breaking up those clumps of flour, we are also kind of cooking the flour, taking the edge off of it so it doesn't have as much of a floury taste. I don't think our burner's hot enough. We're gonna do a quick swap out. Doesn't seem empty. Haha, there we go. That's way hotter. I was gonna say, this mixture seemed a little bit too runny. It's just not cooking hot enough. So we're gonna keep mixing it up, breaking up those clumps. So right here, this texture, it's thickened, but we want it even thicker. This is still a little bit too runny. So you wanna keep cooking it even further. Make sure you cook it long enough to get to this point where it's like this. Okay, nice and thick. So let's go ahead and turn off the burner. And now what we're gonna let this do is we're just gonna set it aside and let it cool down because we're gonna add some eggs to it next. We don't want to scramble the eggs. So just set that aside and let it cool down. And while that's cooling down, let's go ahead and start making the icing. So again, I'll put all these measurements in the description. Don't you worry. We're gonna go in with some milk. Splash of vanilla. Big splash. And powdered sugar. But before we add the powdered sugar, we want to get this a little bit warm because it's going to dissolve it and mix a little easier. So get that heating up. I almost forgot, I like to add just a little bit of butter to that as well. I like the butter in the icing. It's not as just sugary of an icing. It's a little more rounded of an icing. It's optional. Okay, so this is warmed up enough. We can go ahead and add our powdered sugar. Give that a mix, turn that down. And one of the things you can do here as well, instead of vanilla, what we've done in the past is you could do like orange extract, and that adds a really good flavor to the icing for the donut. And you can play around with different flavors with the icing as well. A whisk would probably be a better choice on the tool here, but I forgot to bring mine out. So a knife works just as well. Okay, that icing is looking good. Set it aside. If you're on your stove, keep it on a really low setting. That'll keep it from hardening up too much. So our mixture here has cooled down enough that we can go ahead and add the eggs, which I left inside. Let's go ahead and just add the eggs in directly. So we've got our eggs added. Lately, I've really liked to do this in the KitchenAid with the blade that kind of scrapes the side that mixes this in no time. But for years, I just used a potato smasher. So I'm gonna do that today for science to show you how it's possible. For years, I used a potato masher, okay? And it works. It's not as fast, but it works. And as you're mashing along, you're gonna think, what is this? This is the weirdest thing ever. But just keep going. Okay, so let's do a little check here. That's a good consistency. If you hold it up and it all just falls down really quick, it's too thin. And it's just gonna fall right out of the piping bag. And the texture on it is just not going to be very good. So you could try to add a little more flour if that does happen. But that's the importance of having a scale and weighing it out. Consistent results. So now, how do we get this into a donut? That's probably what you're wondering. So here's what we do. Get a piping bag. Is that what these are called? What's the little metal tip called? Piping metal tip. So I'll put a link in the description where I got this, but we're gonna put it in this piping bag. What I did in the beginning was I just took a Ziploc bag, did the same thing, and then cut the corner and got pretty close to the same results. The texture will be a little different because this makes more of a star texture, so it makes it a little more crunchier, but it works. When you're adding it to the bag, I like to start lower on the bag and start adding and then work my way up. So add a little bit to start. And as you add more, just kind of let the weight of it fall down. In a Ziploc bag, you can kind of just shove it all in. So as you can see, there is a little bit coming out, but it's a very small amount. That's kind of normal. If it just kept pouring out, you might want to be a little more worried. This is definitely a job that if you have a helper in the kitchen, goes a lot quicker with 2 hands. 4 hands. 4 hands. When it's all full, you're gonna pinch the top, just kind of hold it. Now on to the frying. Bum, 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 bum. Here's how I like to place the donuts in the oil. Get as big as a metal spatula as you can, okay? Dip it in the oil. That way it's nice and lubricated. Then you're gonna come over and you're gonna squirt 2 circles, 2 nice circles. And then flip it over, go again. With this amount of oil, I like to do about 3 at a time. You don't want to overcrowd it, or else you get that really oily texture from your donut because it cools down the oil. What we want to do is make sure the oil continues to stay hot. If we add too much at once, it'll bring it down. So with a fryer, you have a light here that tells you if it's trying to heat up. So between each batch, I make sure it gets back up to temp. That's what gives it a nice crispy texture. Yeah, if you've ever been to a restaurant and the fries are just greasy, it's usually because they put it in a fryer that wasn't hot enough and just left it in there forever. So you need your fryer the right temp. It will cook to the right texture. And I like to use just a spider, is what these are called, to kind of maneuver them around and fish them out. You could use a pair of metal tongs. Those work too. I like these because I don't crunch the donuts. But choice is yours. Okay, these are nice and brown, so we're gonna take them out, let them cool down for a bit before we ice them. Don't you burn the crap out of your hands. Okay, so while those are cooking, let me show you. If you come back to your icing and it's got some lumps in it like that, just put it back over the heat and whisk it up. I just took mine off the heat so it's nice and hot. But just whisk it up, keep it moving. I usually do have to whisk it quite a bit in between donuts. But all we're gonna do is take the donut, plop it in. I kind of swirl it around so it gets the sides a little bit better. Take it out, put it on the pan. Same deal here. Oh, smells so good. And here is a great example of what should be happening. As you can see, it's expanding and breaking open. You can see that the donut is growing. Let's flip that over. And that nice brown color is what we want to see when we flip that over. If you flip it over and it's got more of a pale texture, just flip it right back over. We want it to be crispy. Okay, while this is cooking, here's a few other options you can do. These are some of my kids' favorites. I've got just normal cinnamon sugar here, and let's go ahead and make a powdered sugar one. So I just grab a container with a lid, makes it a lot easier. Put in a little bit of powdered sugar. I'll show you when these are done. On our powdered sugar and cinnamon sugar models, we want to put them in right away because that oil is what's going to help the texture. The oil is what's going to help the sugar and cinnamon stick. So plop it in, grab your lid, just give it a little shake, flip it over, another little shake. Okay, and we've got ourselves a nice cinnamon sugar donut. Ooh, that looks good. Look at that steam coming off of it. Okay, the powdered sugar, it just kind of depends on how sugary you like it. I actually will take it out and let it sit just for a second before throwing it in because a lot of that powdered sugar will stick. Shake it up, make sure the lid's on all the way so you don't get powdered sugar all over yourself. Flip it. Shake it. Again, make sure the lid's on all the way. I tend to make a mess when I cook. Now we got ourselves a nice powdered sugar donut. Whew. Nice. Okay, let that sit. So we've got a variety of donuts here that we've made. We've got cinnamon sugar, powdered sugar, and glazed, iced, however you want to say it. Tastes good no matter what. Let's start off with our glazed donut. Take a look at that. Yeah, they're good. That was good today. So let's take a look at the texture. You can see it's crispy on the outside, soft on the inside, very flavorful, a custardy kind of flavor. They're really good today. Okay, so let's try the powdered sugar one. On this one, you can see the powdered sugar kind of got absorbed. Still got the crispiness. Oh yeah, look at that texture inside of there. Oh yeah. On the powdered sugar ones, I'd maybe let the donut sit a little longer because it just kind of turned into like a wet covering. The cinnamon sugar turned out really good. It's not, the sugar hasn't dissolved. Tastes almost like a churro. Like a really good homemade churro. Super good. You guys gotta give this a try. Again, check the description for the recipe and all the gadgets I used today. I'll put links for you to make it easier because I know sometimes it's hard to find those things. So, thanks for stopping by.